Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. I want to make a video extending the ideas in the last three. I'm going to post them all tonight. And it has to do with kind of the beautiful mystery of having a problem and dealing with uh, stepping into the awareness of having an unsolvable problem. Um, so, one of the things that I found most challenging in not only developing a path of sobriety, but a path of peace in sobriety has been one of self-acceptance. And although I found that in in my trauma journey, I found that I needed to have access to all of my memories in order to. Well, my instinct was that if I had access to all of them, then they would stop blindsiding me. My experience with trauma had been this sort of time jumping thing. It wasn't that I had the memories, it was that when the memories were triggered, I was taken out of my present context and psychologically and emotionally and in some ways biologically living as if I was in a past context. I mean, I kept track of my physical surroundings, but everything in me would be having an argument with somebody that's not alive anymore and being in a situation trying to escape it that is long past. And uh, so it was this time jumping thing where I didn't turn to the memory in a normal way, where I just turned to it and I'm still in the present and in the past. It would have such an impact, it would take me out of the present context and shift into the past. And I came to decide and label that as an undigested memory. And that was a key factor in my trauma journey, that what was driving me to find a way to make peace with all of my experience was because of the ways that it was intruding in the life that I was trying to build. And since I was living in a situation where I found all the medical facts of my case and then quickly found that there were no professionals or treatment paradigm to help me, I had to build a life that worked from the inside out. Perhaps it may never be a reasonable expectation in my lifetime that there would be a team that would have a comprehensive way to look at all of my neurological particulars at once to provide a comprehensive plan to me. And without that, the burden of the world was that I would have some kind of guidance for the different parts of my neurological conditions, but it would still depend on me to integrate them in a situation where me beginning to reintegrate language at the same time and trust my way of understanding, it was just too much for me. I could gather the bits of it, but I couldn't integrate them along with my experience of having awareness that worked perfectly well long before I apply language to it. Since that had become a working part of my brain without my realizing it was a sensibility that informed all the meaning I was trying to build. And so there was a extra bit there that didn't fit into any context at all, yet it was still a living part of my experience. So when these past memories kept intruding, I needed a way to be at peace with my current situation, so that I needed a way to work through the memories so that if nothing else, having peace with them, then when I turned to them, they wouldn't derail me from the present. Nothing in my power could make the memories pleasant. Nothing could magically transform them into kumbaya horseshit. Nothing could make it a lovely journey. Those terrible things that happened. And there were lots and lots of them. Um, but the fact that I couldn't change them didn't mean that I couldn't accept them. And if I didn't know how to do that, I needed to find a way or build a way. And it was a mountain. My initial primary that found a way to get me formally diagnosed with autism had me look up the ACE test, which is a series of questions that the ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And I looked them up. She wanted to know the score. And when I read it on Google and I took the score, and I read that two-thirds of all Americans have an answer at least one. A high score is considered 4. I answered them, and I answered yes to 9 of them. Um, And then there was homelessness and rape as an adult, domestic violence. There was medical trauma. There was physical violence. There was like all kinds of stuff and the things that happened out on the streets. And uh, anyway, the point was all of these memories were part of my body of experiences that I were things that were invading sporadically and unpredictably my present life. And so I needed a way so that I could live my life because every time these would come up, they derailed my efforts to integrate back into society. What was I going to do? So as I started developing this and exploring this process of using recovery, my experience with 12-step recovery for addiction to work with trauma as if it were an addiction, even though it's an unfixable thing, and then found that it was reciprocal, that I could use my trauma experience as I make peace with it, my trauma experience as I found myself able to not be afraid of it, when I could accept it as an unchangeable. It felt like a problem because it was so painful, but it was an unchangeable problem because it was in the past. And as I explored inside my inventory process, how to have that awareness and not run from it and not fight it and not be paralyzed by it and not drop out entirely. So the fight, flight, faint, or freeze, to face it and begin feeling what it feels like to be inside my awareness, in awareness of my current self, and also in awareness of this living memory in me that I could not change. When I was opening myself and learning how to be myself inside, actively engaging in these memories to learn my responses to the world rather than to keep obsessively trying to learn what happened in the experience so I could change it, then my experience of myself became wider. And then it turned out that my cultivating ability to have these kinds of unfixable problems, which were trauma memories, they were traumas, they were problems because of how they felt, but I couldn't change them, which made them unchangeable. So that worked very much like the dynamic of addiction. But the beauty of it is, as I learned to make peace with having the awareness of these traumas, and I had to re-understand myself relative to my problems, because as I sat with and became able, cultivated a practice where I could be with feeling what it felt like to have something that felt like a problem, but do nothing except for let it be real and let it inform my consciousness and let it inform my understanding of how I actually respond to the world without fighting it, without running from it, without freezing, without fainting. Then gradually that widened a space in me to have my experience outside of fixing. And as I cultivated and widened that space and it became possible to have an unsolvable problem, then that changed how I started looking at recovery. And I started to see that recovery was the same thing, a slightly different context. At some point, my relationship with my functional addictions had crossed some kind of physiological line where they worked in me in a way that was a problem because of how it distorted who I believed myself to be and thought myself to be, and yet were unchangeable. And so then it was interesting because it feels like my body, for an unchangeable problem, my body says it's on fire and I'm going to die. And my mind can reflect that my body knows that, and my mind can reflect that I'm currently not dead. So when I look at these dynamics, what I have found is that if I accept both my body's perspective in terms of safety and my mind's perspective in terms of reason, that my body says it's deadly, my mind says I survive, and both of those, if I want to respect myself, have to be true. Well, that's a paradox. That's a contradiction. But but I found that that's not an unsurvivable thing. It's just an uncomfortable thing. It's actually a larger context. It's not the simple childish narrativistic context I had. And I began to grow within myself to have an ability to have personal awareness of things that I do not have to resolve with my understanding. I can let it be in me and let them teach me about my experience of the world without remaining obsessed with winning and conquering and ascending and establishing. And, it doesn't give me power, it gives me agency. So that's the beauty and mystery of finally being able to have a problem. That's all.